Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and I want to welcome you in. Thank you for being here. Wish you all a somewhat belated Happy New Year. And I was just seeing the other day, uh, someone had posted something that basically said, like, I'm not sure what the return policy is on 2021, but we've had the 2 week trial period, and I'm not sure if I want to keep it. So 2020 was nasty. 2021 does not appear to have been a lot better, but listen, we're only 2 weeks in, and there's 50 weeks for improvement. And let me just say that uh, the bar has been set pretty low when it comes to talking about improvement. Anyway, just to move on, my guest today is someone who has an expertise in dealing with the new normal. With the pandemic, we're all moving from in-person activities to virtual activities. And when it comes to virtual activities, virtual presentation, Suzy Dickstein is a presentation coach, trainer, and speaker who works with entrepreneurs, executives, and sales teams to deliver riveting virtual presentations to grow their sales and impact. She lives in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, in Western Canada. And Suzy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit, were you virtual when virtual wasn't cool, or have you had to do the dreaded word of the year pivot?
No, it was sort of devastating to me because I had just completed my certification in January, and everything I've learned has been from the masters who were speakers of live events, and I knew nothing about, live. And I also just thought that the entire industry had plummeted, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And then, I cried,
Sure.
and then I cried some more.
Uh-huh.
And then the 2000 world champion of public speaking said, you need to adapt. It's not going to change, but there's some interesting stuff to learn here. And it's actually opened up things for new speakers that hadn't been there before, because a lot of the older speakers were unwilling to pivot and to adapt to the technology, and the fact that they've become basically producers now of these kind of shows almost. And so new people can come in. So here I am.
It makes so much sense. I mean, it's like you, I've been speaking, and all of a sudden in March and April, the bottom literally dropped out. And all of the presentations that were scheduled either went virtual or just went away altogether. And so now you've got to learn how to do virtual presentation. And the problem becomes this, as I see it. So many people are like, well, virtual, it's so much easier because you just show up and you talk, and like, then it's all over. And it's like, the more Zoom presentations you are on, the more virtual presentations you see, the more you realize there is a big difference in the level of presentation and in the presentation savvy of the memorable ones and the ones that will be remembered in infamy, if that makes sense. So tell me then a little bit about, as you're doing this and you're developing your own expertise in doing virtual presentations, is it something that what made you decide to be able to share this with other people and not just do it as something where you are a master in your own right?
I I like to see others flourish. I like to find the gold, and I like to see people transform before my eyes. It's so often that people don't see where they're spectacular. And part of my DNA is to go, oh, right there, that's it. That's the part that we need to build. And then suddenly that person gets really excited and they become a different person. But I think that the amazing thing about public speaking is that you can inspire one person, but then that person can inspire 30 people or 100 or 1,000, and then they can go inspire another room full of people and another. And so it's amazing how when you have the chutzpah to actually step out and put yourself out there, that you can really make a difference much farther down the line than you ever thought you could.
Okay. I love it. Just for the sake of definition, not everyone speaks Yiddish. So
Oh,
what is chutzpah?
audacity, go.
Okay. So I grew up in an area where there were a large Jewish population. So I understand a little bit of Yiddish. And my explanation of chutzpah was for someone who killed their parents and then in court pled leniency as an orphan. It's just something and amazing.
No.
And amazing.
No.
Okay.
No. It's simply the audacity, the courage to be bold, to do things that are against, the grain. Sometimes that's just openly speaking what you're thinking instead of being polite. It's pushing the envelope past what you normally would do.
Makes perfect sense. And I will apologize then for my meager attempt at explanation. So then as you are helping people to develop themselves, to understand who they are, in some ways, you said that you're helping them to develop into a different person, but I would think that it's a metamorphosis in which they are coming out as a more beautiful form of themselves and not literally becoming someone who they were not to begin with. Is that reasonable?
It's absolutely true. It's very much going back to their God-given talents, the things that are so natural, their strengths, the things that make them literally feel strong when they do them. So, and that transformation is not actually just for them as the speaker. I very much see the presentation as a transformation, process for the audience. And to me, that's a difference in my mindset, my viewpoint of how I see presentations versus regular people see it. They see it as like an informational transfer. And I don't, to me, let Google do that.
Sure.
We can do much better. And so those long lasting impression of a story, of a presentation, that's a presentation that changed you, not just made you a little bit more knowledgeable.
Well, information rarely changes people, but it's that personal connection. It is when you share of yourself and you invest of yourself in other people, that's planting the seeds of change. And that's what's going to make the difference. So let's kind of talk about this process and I apologize again for the fact I have family that's Canadian. So I also speak a bit of Canadian and we can talk about the process as well. So whether it's the process or the process, let's talk about how, when we're looking for the ability to be an engaging speaker and to do something in a virtual platform that makes a difference, is that just in speaking style during the presentation, or how does that start and when and where does it start?
So I call that structure. And pardon me, I think that's the step that most people skip. They think that, okay, how do they literally go to do a presentation? They sit down, they open up PowerPoint, and they sort of, say to themselves, what's all the information I want to transfer over to my audience? And to me, that's not where you start. I start with pencil and paper and I think about, where is my audience? What's their point A? What's the problem that they have as they think about it? How do they think? How do they feel? How do they behave? And where can I leave them in the short amount of time that I have? And so where is point B? Well, how do they think? How do they feel? How do they behave? And what stories, what different way of looking at the problem can I give them that they will want to actually change? Because my belief is that most people sort of assume that the audience will change just by transferring this information. They say, this is how to do it. But most people don't want to change. It's actually in our instinct to not change. And so a lot of your presentation has to be on the why should you change, not just how can you change.
Yeah. Change is bad. Change hurts us. We are opposed to change. It's a very common mindset. And in some ways, then what you're doing is you start with kind of the end goal in view. Where do you want people to be at the end?
Mhm.
And then once you've assessed where they are now, where you want them to be at the end, it becomes how do you structure, how do you create the vehicle that moves them from literally, as you said, point A to point B, right? Is that right?
Mhm. Absolutely. But of course, the point B needs to relate to whatever it is that your business objective is as well, whatever it is that you're selling if you have a product. I watched a great presenter who had this whole presentation, but then the ending, like the freebie that she offered, it didn't match at all. And it almost like it deflated the whole entire presentation. And so you need to be able to offer people a solution, a next step, an action that they can start making a dent in that transformation. They can prove to themselves that they can change. It is worthwhile. This is something that they want to do, so that they'll keep going with it and make the longer lasting change.
Okay. So you're talking about one of the goals of doing a presentation is to create sales. And I've seen this, and I know that there's a number of people who have seen this. There are a lot of presentations that don't lead to sales. Do you have some suggestions, some ideas for why is it that presentations don't lead to sales, and what can we do to to fix that issue?
Well, one of the reasons that most presentations don't lead to sales is we tell the audience that they're wrong. And I think most presentations are like that, where like my freebie is about the things that people do wrong, but I would never do that in an actual presentation. So I wouldn't say don't do this, because people get their backs up and what they're saying in their head is a no. And so what I think actually, and virtual is so like this, you add in, let's say you're not looking at the lens of the camera and you're looking at yourself, because it's totally natural to look people in the eye. And so even though it's ourselves, we look at ourselves, but you're not, contacting them. So then there's like a little no there. And then maybe your microphone isn't very good and there's a little no there. And if you don't talk about their problem and instead you do this thing like they do on webinars where they talk about themselves for 15 minutes, and it's another little no. And so there, it adds up all these no's. And so a better presentation is very thoughtful in building one yes very specifically after another. And if you line up the yeses, you'll get the yes in the end. And the yes is, I mean, really very much a, know, like, and trust factor. But that's not because people go at the presentation from this point of view of give them information. Almost, I want to seem like the smartest person in the room, and that's why you'll hire me. I don't buy that, because I think that people don't make decisions from their brains. They just don't. You want to think that. We want to think that people are rational human beings, but they're not like that. They make it, first of all, I think, with their gut. And then second of all, with their heart. And then third, the funny bone. But the brain, that's the last one. They're actually more rationalizing than rational decision makers. We do what we want. That's how we are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the premise of this show is to bring in people that are smart people, but I'm not looking for people that have a broad range of knowledge. I'm looking for people who are smart in a specific area. And so by trying to impress people in being the smartest person in the room in general, that's egotistical. When you are sharing with them that you have an expertise in a certain area and you can help them in an area where they don't necessarily have that knowledge, that's a very different selling point. And what you're doing is you're saying, listen, you've got a pain point, you've got an itch, you've got this area where it's causing you pain, it's causing your business not to excel. And I have the medicine, I have the solution, I have the information that will be able to move you forward. And it's got to appeal as you said, not just on the intellectual level, but it's got to make a connection. There's got to be some emotional uh, response to what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I would also say that this, I have to be the smartest person in the room adds a lot of pressure. The presenter ends up very much focused on them and what do I have to bring to the table. So let's say, just for example, people are worried about the Q&A section, and they're worried that someone's going to ask a question and they don't know the answer. But because I see, when I present, like, I'm just me, I'm just having a conversation. It's not I'm better than you. It's just I'm sharing some things that I know. And so let's say someone asks me a question that I don't know in a Q&A. I'm in a live room. There are 100 people who are interested in the same topic as me. Someone asks, and I say, does anyone in the room know the answer to that question?
Right.
7 people put their hand up. Somebody gives the answer. We keep moving along. The pressure is not on me when I don't need to be smarter and elevated. And I actually think that the trend has shifted away from this sort of elevated type speaker to this more conversational way of presenting. And I love it. I think it's absolutely amazing.
Is part of your training for doing virtual presentations to have a more interactive and conversational style than your typical like talking head presentation, where in a live presentation you can't really do a lot of interactive things, but you're up on a podium and you're in front of everybody, but with virtual you have a lot more opportunity for interaction and for you know back and forth dialogue.
You have to, because when people are used to looking at a screen, at a TV, they're used to being entertained, right? They're
Sure.
used to watching, sports or playing video games or watching TV or movies, and they're entertaining. And if you watch any of those change over the last, I'm older, 30, 40 years, you'll see that the tempo has really shifted. It's a lot of jump cuts. And so entertaining, people want to be engaging, but the bar has risen to engaging isn't sufficient anymore. It actually needs to be entertaining, which means when you do a presentation, you can't have just a slide deck. It can't be one slide sitting on there and you're talking for like 5 minutes. People are just sort of dying. It needs to, like, for me, I think you probably should have 5 times as many slides as you do. You want to have videos in there. You want to have photos. You want to have jokes. You want to go back and forth between you and your slides to be a talking head to tell a story. And you want to have a co-host, and you want to go to polls and chats. And if it's not that entertaining and they're in a home environment, other things are going to be more interesting and normal for that situation for them to do.
It makes so much sense. I mean, people are staring at a screen at this point with people working from home. People are staring at a screen almost from their waking moment until they go to bed at night. And whether it's a TV or a computer or a tablet or a phone, it's all screen time. And you've got a lot of competition, and you've got to be able to fit in there in a way that is realistic and yet is impactful. It makes sense. One of the tools that you talk about is storytelling. And I'd be tell me a little bit more about using that as a tool and the way that it kind of helps to create the connection that you're looking for.
Storytelling to me seems like the magic bullet of almost everything you need. So let's just start with the basics. You have a really good point to make. If you don't anchor that point in something that literally anchors it in the person's head, it will fall away and they won't take it with them. And the point in your presentation is for them to leave with your message. And part of that to me is it has to be in their imagination. And information never sticks in people's brains that way as a picture. And so one of the presentations I just did was basically how to do vivid storytelling. Now, Kendra Hall has this notion that I heard that I thought was just mind blowing. It's called narrative transportation. And what happens is, okay, so you know the situation where you're reading a book and you're sort of half reading and there's like a little movie playing and you can see the scene happening? That's exactly what you want. Because when that happens, and it happens because you've given enough detail that the person can see what you're talking about. They can see the scene, they can see the characters, you know, it's come to life. That person is an author of their side of the story, but you're bringing in your experience of what that person looks like, that scene looks like. And so you're a co-author of that story. And because you're both co-writing this story, it weaves into your brain. And so this picture that you have, it can stay there. All of us know what it's like to have a story that we can remember 30 years later or 40 or however many years later, because it's woven in. And so to me, that view of looking at storytelling as like painting scenes, totally priceless.
You really, you make an excellent point there. And here's why. I grew up in a home without a TV. So I read a ton of stuff when I was a kid. My parents encouraged that. They got me all kinds of books, and I was an avid reader. And I remember seeing a movie of a book I had read, and it was just like, it was so disappointing to me because the movie that I had created in my head as I read the book was so much richer, and the special effects were better, and and all of that was just stimulated by the written word. And
Yeah.
if you can do that with the spoken,
Dialogue.
yeah, if you can
Yeah.
do that with the spoken word as well, because listen, you can share a story, and the story is about, you have the characters and you have the action and you have this stuff, and people's minds fill in all the blanks of the details, and they fill in the richness of the story. And in your mind, that it's such a beautiful scene that, seeing it in,
Yes.
yes.
No,
So
I was just going to say, but that's the part where, again, it takes that chutzpah, that audacity. The people tell stories, but they drive them out. They narrate them. They tell them like it's happening now. But if you want to bring a story to life, you need to go back to that place, see yourself in the scene, paint the scene, paint the characters, let them talk. How many stories that people tell, the characters never say a thing, but that's not how really amazing stories are. And that's where the entertainment value is. That's where, if you want to be a funny speaker, it's not about telling jokes. It's about letting the characters say those funny things. Even if that character is like what you thought or what you think they thought, you can get away with so much. And the emotions, people want to be engaging, they want to have vocal variety. It's not about just having more charisma or more energy. It's about letting that character go, yeah, I wanted to, or, oh my God, I can't. And that's, and it takes the mindset of, I'm going to move up another level. And, but when you do, wow, good things happen.
yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I think about somebody. Okay, Jeff Dunham. Jeff Dunham he's the guy with all the puppets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he is booked everywhere, but as a presence on stage, he doesn't get any of the punchlines. All of the punchlines come from the puppets, the characters that he's created. They're the ones that are funny, and he's just kind of there as a medium for them to bounce their punchlines off of. And so in that way, the stories that you're telling, they're not me stories. They're not stories about me. They're stories about characters and about elements and about emotions, but it's not about making me look good. It's about moving the audience and connecting with the audience and creating something that moves them to action. Is that correctly summarizing what we're talking about?
Yeah, I heard a presentation coach who lives here in Victoria speak, and he had this beautiful notion that you're not really the hero in your presentation, in your story. It's actually the audience, because you're already on the other side. You've already succeeded. The hero is the person who has the problem, who has a goal, who doesn't know how to get out of it, which is the exact definition of the audience at that moment. They don't know what to do. The way that they're thinking is impeding their progress. So as you tell the story, then you say to yourself, okay, but isn't it me who, gets the aha? Well, yeah, but you didn't give yourself the aha, because if you had known what to do, you would have never been in the problem in the first place. And so I find one of the things that people miss out on the most when they tell stories is that moment where everything changed. And that moment is the gold in the story. And sometimes that gold comes from a person, that Yoda like guru. You're not the
Right.
guru. But sometimes it happens because you read something in a book, or it's small little things that happen, but at some point there's that shift, and that aha, that shift becomes the message for the audience. It's what they're going to learn so that they can be different when they walk out the door. So again, it's not really information. It because you're not telling them. That's the thing, is you're sort of hiding the message within the story so you don't get their backs up, which is what we were talking about originally, where we sort of like to do this. We tell people what's the end thing, but you can't do it that way because people don't work that way. But stories, right? The Bible is filled with stories about teaching you the moral lessons, and it's been working for thousands of years.
Sure.
PowerPoints have rewritten the way to tell stories and presentations, but I'm more like, go back to the old way.
Yeah. So in some ways, you talk about the hero's journey, and the hero has a problem, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with the problem. Someone comes along that is the guide, the Yoda, the Sherpa, the guru, who gives them the solution, and it helps them to get to where they want to be. And the hero of that story is not actually the hero that had the problem. It's the guide is the one who ultimately has helped them. And whether that's a book, whether that's a person, whatever it is, that's what makes the difference. I just want to really quickly wrap up with you gave just a really important tip that I want to highlight. You talked about the importance of it not just being slides, of it being people seeing you, of there being more than just a slide. You're using polls. Can you just kind of take us out with maybe two or three other tips that you could give quickly on virtual presentations?
Yes. So one thing is this conversational way of talking to people, right? We got to look them in the eyes. It needs to feel like we're actually talking to them in person, but Nick Morgan, in his book, I think it's called Can You Hear Me? He talks about how everything virtual has dulled all the five senses. And so what we need to do is, as much as we can, bring that back up, which means, you have a really good microphone so you can hear me. You have good lighting so that you can see me, um, so that you have that trust factor. Being able to see me talking with my hands, it's moving, it's energy, it's conversational, it feels normal. I feel like the problem with this Zoom fatigue is that we strain to do what we do so very naturally in person, where we're trying to figure out, does this work for us? Do I want to? And it's hard when we can't see the person well, we can't hear them, or they have the camera facing up at the ceiling and your brain is sort of distracted with this. It doesn't feel right. And then the second part is going back to this idea of being more entertaining, right? You need to, there's the dulling of what we look like, because I'm not two-dimensional, right? I'm a real person, 3D.
Sure.
And so you need to bring out a little bit more of you, but then you need to be in that conversation. Ask them what they think. You can't talk at a person for like an hour. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So you need to let them have their opinions. You need to let them laugh. You need to let them think. You make a really important point. Let them ponder. It's the presentation is not about me. In the end, everything about the presentation is about your audience.
I think that's a great way to end this interview. It makes so much sense. Listen, Suzy, if people are looking to get a hold of you, where can they find you on the web? What's the easiest way to get you?
SuzyDickstein.com. And my homepage basically offers you a little 14-minute video training on the 10 biggest virtual presenter mistakes that people make. And in the email sequence, I even give you a checklist so that you can go through them. A lot of these things are just small, but they add up to all those little no's that people have in their heads. And so I think that one's useful. Also, under the freebie section, there's another freebie called, it's called free resources, called the 5 most engaging hooks. That one's more about the getting the yeses. And that one's a little bit over an hour. And I think those 2 things would be very valuable to your audience. And I hope that it helps them to become a riveting presenter and storyteller.
It's fantastic. Well, I think what you talked about is when we're in school, the difference between a C and an A is just getting a couple more questions right on the test. And so what you're talking about is if you can make a couple of those tweaks, it's going to move you from an average presentation to an excellent presentation. That's wonderful. Suzy, you have shared a ton of information. You have established that you are smart, and I have definitely learned from you. It's now time to establish that you are indeed a person. It's 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready for this?
I'm looking forward to find out how human I am. Shoot.
What is your proudest accomplishment?
So I very much had the thought that I was a quitter. And I think a lot of people do. Here we are at New Year's resolution time. And, some people, I heard this guy, he quit on the 2nd day. And I kept trying to start businesses and I just kept not succeeding. And I took something sort of irrelevant, but I owned a bicycle. And so I decided I was going to just fight the gremlin in my head that would tell me, you can't do this. No, you don't want to. And so I decided I'm just going to go for a bicycle ride every day. And it didn't matter how long I went. And it really wasn't for the exercise. It was just to teach myself that I can hold on to a promise that I make to myself, because if we can't trust ourselves, then we can't trust. Right now, I think I'm at like 300 and something days, but I think I got up to 1 year and 9 months at one point of doing this every single day. And now I don't believe that I'm a quitter anymore. And I think it's transformed me from the inside.
I love it. And you're in Victoria where you can go for a bike ride every day. It's not an impossibility. A position that is slightly envious. Is there anything that you wish would come back into fashion? Something either from, it could be from your childhood or anywhere along the line of which you say, this is a fashion trend that I wish would come back.
A fashion trend that would come back.
Or you can say, here's a fashion trend that I am glad will never, I hope never comes back.
Actually, you know what? When I was in high school, I believe it was, I think it was like grade 7 or 8, we used to wear these jean jackets with these sort of like patches on our backs of like, rock and roll bands that we liked. And I liked how we showed our personalities, and some people had them stitched in permanently and some of them changed them. And actually I have a business idea of something similar, because I find you know, we should show our personalities more. We should be more out there and happy and proud of the things that we love. So I think that one's really cool.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit beforehand about the fact that uh, you are Jewish and you come from Montreal. And so I'm wondering, what is the what is the food that makes you feel most connected to your heritage? Or what is the dish or the dinner that makes you feel like this gets me back to my roots, to my family?
My grandmother's chopped liver on everything tam tam crackers is my heavenly place to be. Chopped liver is similar to pate, but I tell you, I don't like pate at all. And it's just when it's like creamy and it's like juicy and everything tam tam crackers makes it hard. And there's like the onions that have been fried, and it's just that's my happy place. And they don't have any of that here in Victoria because they don't really have any Jews here. So I miss it tremendously.
Okay. Uh, that was so far from any answer that I have had about food. Literally, no one has ever said chopped liver is my happy place, but it works for you, and that's okay. Suzy Dickstein, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show. I, I appreciate it. I hope folks go check out your website, check out the freebies that you have offered, both the video and the resources. Thank you so much. For all my audience, thanks for listening. I will remind you, as always, that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.